Hey everybody, this is Paul with the Curators, and I am here with my special guest and friend, Shauna Miller-Humes. We are the Wide Awake and the Non-Programmable. We are supporters of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. to become the 47th President of the United States. And I thought we would open up, Shauna, before I introduce you, I thought I would present a little movie clip here to introduce our audience today to the concept of what we're going to be talking about, which is power. And this is from I'm sure you know who Kevin Costner is, and Will Patton and Gene Hackman, who's my
You
favorite
murdered
actor.
Sam, did you? You asshole. You have no idea what men of power can do. Fuck! Wait, sick fuck. Scott has been a loyal and valuable friend. I let that friendship cloud my judgment.
That scene goes downhill from there. We won't go into how it ends, but one of the concepts that I always took away from that scene in that movie is that reminiscent of the old phrase, absolute power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. So just to introduce you properly, Shauna, you are the host of the Who For podcast, and I've had the pleasure of listening to several of your episodes there as well. And
Thank you.
I've also gotten to know you pretty well through our grassroots movement, and have just been amazed at the work you do, the brilliance that you bring to the tasks, and the enthusiasm as well. Hopefully, we'll continue to move in the direction of getting Bobby elected. So, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Paul. I'm really happy to be
Yeah,
here.
yeah. Why don't you do me a favor, Shauna? Just fill the audience in real quick on, what you've been doing, what political experience you have, because I know it's pretty extensive and very important work.
Thank you. Thank you. That was a really, really wonderful and kind introduction. So I worked in Texas politics from 2015 when I was an intern. I worked every session, 3 sessions in a row. So I was an intern and then a legislative director and then a budget analyst for the Legislative Budget Board. I have yet to work in a federal or national capacity. So this campaign actually has been my first endeavor into that area, which has been really interesting to hear what's going on in other places, to compare, to find all of the humiliating, things that are in common, and then stark and all equally humiliating differences. And all of it, I left because I didn't really find a place for myself where if you go into politics, somebody wise on this campaign has recently said, when you work on a campaign, you either want to do something or you want to be somebody. And I really, really wanted to do something. And I felt very comfortable being in the background, being a staffer, preparing my member or preparing the committee to make good decisions, just to provide analysis and to provide support. I really enjoyed those. However, the day-to-day devastation of what was happening and what I was witnessing happen, the decision-making, it was really, really difficult for me to tolerate watching that and also continue working and have good mental health. And so
A lot of frustration.
frustration, but so if you do several years of it, it's comes in waves. At first, it's shock and disbelief. Then it's frustration because you try to work against it once you figure it out. Then it's despair because you realize that you can't do anything about it. Then it's grief because you have to grieve the fact that your understanding of reality was incorrect and that you're now in a new reality, and you have to cope with that because the old one is gone. You have been birthed anew. Yeah, it was wonderful training for whatever I meant to do in my life, Paul, and I'm grateful for it. While it was painful, it was also very transformative. And so no regrets. But I have a
I
lot to say about power and what it is and what it does and who has it.
and we'll definitely get to that. And the illusion of who has it, right? I always rely on an old phrase that for many years of my life I would have laughed at anyone who said this, but I've changed. And I say this all the time. Bobby Kennedy has helped me to change. I haven't changed just in the last 2 years, but all of the changes that I've been able to accomplish in my life, I think, are now being harnessed to the purpose of helping Bobby get elected. And and one of the things I've come to rely on is this notion that God, and I don't mean this in a religious sense necessarily, you know, but God has a plan, or life has a plan. And when we go through these uh, periods of bewilderment and despair and new realities, and it all prepares us for something. We don't know exactly what, but I feel some
Something is
clarity.
happening.
Something is
Something is
happening,
happening. Yeah.
and we
And
have.
you and I and the candidate, Bobby Kennedy, we all have the same understanding. And you don't know that you have the understanding until you do. And once you do, you can never go back. There's a veil. I was, there is a division there. And I don't say that to be condescending towards the people that have not reached it yet. But when you figure it out, you'll know. And it's kind of a trip, you know?
Mhm,
And I
mhm.
think Bobby Kennedy is waking a lot of people up because of these podcasts that he's been on and these long interviews. And I think it's incredible.
This concept of power that you refer to and who has it, the thought occurs to me, the ones who have it are the ones that we, the people, decide to give it to. We may not
100%.
consciously, we may not consciously give it to them. We may just think of it as we're trusting them. But that puts our role in society into a more passive position. Instead of being active participants in democracy, we become passive. And so we just trust, and we kind of look the other way. And then we have this government that has bestowed all of these gifts upon us because they print money, and the stock market goes up, and everyone gets a new kitchen granite countertop and a second car in the driveway. They get to go on vacations, all kinds of goodies, right? That this funny money has created, without regard to what the ultimate price would be, because for every dollar that gets printed and enjoyed and relished by somebody on the way up, there's a commensurate liability on the way down. And usually that liability is something that you don't recognize until it's too late. We're seeing it now. We're seeing it being
And
measured in, yeah, in
and the
all
people
kinds of
that can
ways.
afford the damage control basically come away unscathed, because there will be effects across the economic spectrum. But the ones that can afford it will be just fine. The ones that can't are now facing homelessness at this point. We've got a lot of people in this country facing homelessness. Facing homelessness where we're like 3 weeks away if they're not able to kind of get things together and piece things together. We're kind of in a desperate state. Not to mention, we have live fighting in the streets at this point in
That's right.
Colombia, in New York.
Like Colombia
So
is a perfect example of what happens on this downslope, right? And
that's right.
so we start looking more and more like a third world country because we are
That's
turning
right.
into a third world country. Yes,
That's right.
yes. And these people, I don't know if you've ever heard the term Cantillon effect, or properly said Cantillon. It's a French word.
No.
Uh, it's derived from an economist, I think, in the 18th century in France, who makes the point that when you have a central bank printing money, those entities or individuals who are closest to that money printing spigot, right? Think politicians themselves, the lobbyists that grease their palms, and all of those people, right?
The people that
Uh,
turn the knobs. Yeah.
Yes, yes. And those
Yeah.
who are closest, and let's call the Fed or the government generally as the ones who are spending all this money and making decisions on who gets that money and where it goes. And the
The
Fed
Federal
is
Reserve is not the government. It is a private institution. But yes, the Federal Reserve and the government. Yes.
the Federal Reserve and the government where there's supposed to be a wall.
Oh,
It
yeah.
was originally designed to be that way, but as can happen when we time goes by and you become a superpower and you start to get this creep effect starts to enter into the system, and that wall starts to come down, and essentially the Fed and the government, perhaps not overtly in the press, but behind the scenes, they merge and they become one. And so whoever's closest to the Fed's money printing spigot, this is the Cantillon effect, they are the ones who benefit most disproportionately, right? And like you said, the ones who, the average person is the one left holding the bag for that because there's always a price to be paid. And the perfect concept that comes to mind now is inflation. We're seeing inflation because when you print money, you inflate the money supply. The word inflation is actually a misnomer. It was designed to deceive people. It's really the consumer price index or increasing prices are the result of inflation, inflation of the money supply. That's the Fed. That's the printing of the money. And those who are closest to that get all the benefit. It's a sign of the powerlessness of the people, or at least the perceived powerlessness of the people, and the betrayal by those who have the power presently of the public interest. They've sold us out for their own gain. I can see this very clearly, and we have plenty of evidence for it. So yeah,
I would
what are
love
your
to give
thoughts
an
on that?
example. Yeah, I would love to give another
Go for it.
example.
Yeah.
So in small town Texas, there's a very small amount of variety of places where you can go purchase things. There's always a Walmart. There's always Dollar Generals and Dollar Trees. We used to have small businesses everywhere. Those were overtaken eventually. Most of the time it was by Walmart of forcibly closing those small businesses.
Mm-hmm.
But that already happened, right? So we're here. If Walmart closes a store because they're not making enough money, or they keep getting stolen from because people can't afford food anymore, then that community no longer has a place to get their food. We're kind of getting to that situation. So that's kind of what's coming next. And the decisions that are made, the inputs result that are imaginary result in material, harsh, catastrophic impacts. And yeah, I would love to talk about the structure
The
because
corporations are making a financial
that's what it
decision. It's
is.
it's
Power
always a
structures.
financial decision for them. In the old days, they bore a natural sense of community responsibility. When I was young, back in this, I was born in the late 50s, but in the 60s and early 70s even, I remember this concept of not just corporations building shareholder value, but also having a stake in the community and caring about what schools were in their community and what was being done for the playgrounds for the children and so forth. These were standard operating practices for these corporations. But as can happen, and I have a whole diatribe on how it happened and why it happened, but let's just get to the punch on that. They are no longer interested in community. They're interested in profit and promotions and stock options. And like we said, power. It's not just a decision of, what can I
Right.
afford? Do I go to a doctor, or do I have to give up 2 days of eating to go to a doctor? Those decisions are happening every day all across America with a huge percentage of the population. But we are now literally paying with our health and with years of our lives. So the feudalizing of America is reaching truly epidemic proportions, all in the interest of power for the few. That's the level it's gotten to. And the media and the press are all designed to deceive us and create distractions, and cell phones, and billionaire heroes sitting in the perch who get interviewed by God knows who on TV, right? So all of these distractions are occurring while these atrocities are occurring all across America. So that was my long answer. You can give your short answer or a long answer.
Oh,
Go ahead.
well, feudalism is a great word, actually.
Mhm.
That's exactly what's happening if you don't own your own property. You're renting land, your house or your apartment, and you're working for somebody for profit. You're not owning your own labor, you're working for a wage for somebody else. So, I would like to explain what's happened. If you have a situation or an economy or a market or a system where there's rules, fiduciary responsibility rules of the CEO to continue to make decisions that will increase profit for shareholders, over time, when you've reached the edges of your available market, then you have to keep going. You have to keep increasing your profit. If you don't, then you go out of business because all of the shareholders in the stock market will pull their money out because they're not making any money off of you. If you stop making money or if you're just constant, you're done. So you have to continuously, over years, over decades, make decisions for profit. And that's why we have the world we have today. We cannot have enormous corporations where the burden of responsibility is distributed across all of the shareholders. We have to have a person, like you said, community responsibility. If one person, a business owner, was responsible for every single business decision that he made, then he would make more ethical decisions, wouldn't he? But
Mhm.
if a CEO or if a corporation makes a decision, the corporation is held responsible. They have a fund in their budget for litigation to account for all the times that they get sued for their decision making that is horrible and unethical or killing humans. And
They're known
nobody is
criminals.
held
The,
responsible
they're
for that.
they're known criminals. They settle. We we lock up the person selling weed on the corner, but these and certain industries, and we're going to talk about the industrial complex in a little bit, but the certain industries are laden with these known criminals who settle for billions of dollars because it's a known cost to them. They have their bean counters and they know the cost of doing business. And again, it's a financial decision, right?
The
Yeah.
fact that they have billions of dollars available for their litigation is, I think people don't understand what a billion is. I think people can kind of grasp what a million is because it's a thousand thousands, but I don't think people conceptually understand what $1 billion is. And this is what power is, right?
How about
That's
how
what
about a
power is.
trillion? How about a trillion? How
Exactly.
about Apple Computer and Microsoft being worth north of $2 trillion in market value? While all the mom and pops and Amazon and
And guess what?
Meta's not
They'll
quite that much, but
continue to go up. They will
yeah,
continue to go up forever.
the oligarchy. hmm
Forever,
But
they
they'll
will
continue to go
continue
up.
to. And you know what? But what does going up mean? So Apple will continue to
Right,
invent new ways to make money off of you. And we already
right.
know because we've already watched those documentaries on Hulu about the social or Netflix about the social media exploitation of the marketing companies, the data selling. We're aware of that. We know that that's happening. They must continue to find new ways to make more money off of us. How are they going to do that?
Here's my example. Because this just happened to me, because I've gone down the rabbit hole on some new things. I've been down the
Oh,
rabbit hole on a lot of issues, but
okay.
most recently because I've been introduced by my colleague Brenda Wagner and Johnny Paradise and others into the realm of our food supply and the poisoning of our farm communities and our water, and how glyphosate is being, spread by. And we did a whole segment with Karen Laurie, the actress, who's a friend of Bobby.
Ooh.
She talked a lot about this, how glyphosate Roundup gets sprayed on the fields,
Yeah.
several pounds per person per year, and it's cancerous and it destroys the soil. And the only way they can get anything to grow is to put in what they call Roundup Ready seeds, which are GMO based, right? And we have no knowledge of what toxicity levels there are and what problems they can cause. So I'm in a hotel. I went up to Boston to visit my twin boys last weekend, and I stayed in a Fairfield Inn, and they had free breakfast. Now, that was one of the reasons I chose that hotel, because I like the idea of going down and getting a cup of coffee, an egg, a couple of eggs, and whatever, right? I I walk into the kitchen and I see, and I'm not here to punish any brands or names. Marriott, I love Marriott, but I see um, Cheerios. I see Fruit Loops. Now, Cheerios are one of the it's one of the unhealthiest things you can put in your body. This cereal contains poison. There's a chemical in there called chlormequat. It's also in Quaker Oats oatmeal, which was also
Awesome.
in the hotel. And Fruit Loops has all kinds of dyes in there that so I'm getting
So
to a
they're
couple
all
of
in on it.
so they're all in on it. And so Marriott is ordering their food from these pesticide laden companies who can probably undercut the competition because of their labor costs being so low, because they instead of doing it the right way, they do it the poisonous cheaper way.
They have
And
to. They have to,
they
Paul,
have to, right? Until we the
because they
people
have
stop
to
them,
continue to cut cost or create more business. They
right?
have to.
But then part of the narrative is,
It's
that
cheaper. It's
that
cheaper for them to do. That's the answer. It's cheaper for them to
it's
do this.
cheaper.
So they
It's
will do
cheaper.
it.
And at the same time, they're telling children
Makes me so
across
mad.
America, you should be eating this not only for breakfast, but occasionally for dinner too. You know, they, they want you
Promoting
to,
it.
they're promoting it. Now, this is this is also this is also where the the perversion of power gets uh, clearly, front and center with the failure of the agencies, right? The USDA, the FDA, the EPA. These are the agencies that are there with taxpayer dollars that are supposed to be protecting us from these corporate monsters, but instead they get bought off and paid for, and they're now protecting the corporations instead of protecting us. That's what's happening. Did you know that glyphosate Roundup is allowed at 10 times the level in this country than it is allowed in Europe? People are going to Europe and getting well because they're leaving the toxic environment that our food supply has gotten to, right? Uh,
Yeah.
so, so,
I would love
you
to
know,
I would love to make a comment about this. So,
go right ahead.
I recently applied and had an interview with a regulatory agency at the state level. And one of the questions that they asked in the interview was, "What is the point of regulation?" And I thought it was a great question. And what I said was, regulation is for people that cannot afford to sue companies for doing the wrong thing. That's it.
Hmm. Right,
It's the catch-all for people that cannot afford to take people to court for the stuff that they do. And if there's nobody making sure that the companies are doing what they're supposed to do or stopping them from doing the things that they're really not supposed to do, then nobody is.
right.
And only the people that can afford to sue them are able to hold them accountable. That's a huge
Because
problem.
because the legal system is your first line of defense against that sort of thing, right? But there are many, many, many. people who cannot avail themselves of the legal system, so they need the protection agencies. And I think that, it depends on which agency we're talking about. So I think the FDA, and we could talk about incentive structures and how do you get promoted in the FDA, who funds the FDA, right? There's all of these shenanigans going on, and they're supposed to protect not just the people who can't find the legal system easily, but they're supposed to protect the overall public interest. Is is this drug safe? Is this vaccine safe, et cetera, right? And and be responsible for the Hippocratic oath, and not thinking of it in terms of, is this good for business? That should be the last thing on the mind of the FDA ever. And the same for the EPA, right? And this is a failure of both political parties, Shauna. This is not Democrat or Republican. So I'm telling you guys, we can't afford this nonsense. We simply
Everybody's
cannot
doing real
afford it.
bad. Everybody's
Right,
doing terribly.
right.
They're making
And now
horrible decisions because of the way that it has been structured and set up by
by
law,
both parties, by both
by both
parties.
parties. That's right.
Exactly. And that's why we're here to talk about. And I think our second half of this conversation will get into Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who,
Oh, the last third.
whatever the time allotment is, I'm flexible, Shauna, as you can tell. I have a lot to say too. But the amazing thing to me is, here we have a genuine hero who's actually the right man at the right time, the white knight in shining armor, who literally has the skill set and the experience to take this on. He's the one guy who's looking out for the public interest. Democrat or Republican, it doesn't
Yeah,
matter.
he came out of
So
nowhere to me.
yeah. And all you have to do is listen to him, research his track record, right? And I'll put up. You can talk as I'm putting this up, Shauna. I want to share the screen about these industrial complexes, all of which Bobby Kennedy is prepared to take on. Okay, and
Yeah,
this
he's
is
talked at length about them in many
yes,
podcasts.
and this is where the power is. We can talk about power, right? Military power is 700 plus military bases around the world, right? Uh, Becoming a member of NATO requires that you spend money. Your country has to spend taxpayer dollars on uh, equipment manufactured by U.S. defense contractors, right? That's part of the deal of being in NATO. Um, their
Everybody
model.
needs to everybody needs to watch War Dogs if you haven't,
Mhm.
and so that you can learn about the military industrial complex. It's kind of a silly movie, but that's how things went down, and
Mhm.
people need to understand that and accept it.
Uh, Again, what's the power of the people would say, peace over war. And most people
Every
want
time.
peace. Most
Every
people want
time
peace.
people will choose peace.
But the military industrial complex has another agenda, don't they? I mean, they really do.
So
War is not the
actually,
last option for them.
this is actually, I would love to make a comment about this because I think it's, on one hand, they need peace because business operates on peace. You can't have chaos in a business economy because they need those structures to be very, resolute. They need them to
Good
be
point.
absolute pillars. So on one hand, they need the home front to be subdued.
Hmm.
And then they need there to be chaos somewhere else where they need to be extracting resources. Chaos means that something is highly exploitable. Like, we're kind of having chaos right now. It would not be shocking if somebody came in and exploited us because we had chaos right now.
Right, right. There has been arguments presented that the military sometimes will let certain events unfold to justify their next move. And
They'll
then,
let things happen. They will set things in motion themselves.
Mhm,
The Bobby Kennedy has talked at length of implications of the CIA that has, I mean, more recently declassified documents from the CIA talking about all just these. There's so many coups. How many coups are there? Like
mhm,
15?
mhm,
So not only will they just watch things happen, no, they'll go on the offensive and make things happen and put their people in. And then have this kind of revolving door of okay, it's in business's best interest for us to go to war and for us to get this resource for our businesses. And whether that resource is natural resource or labor resources, because
mhm.
we will go into a country and invade it so that a corporation can go in there and employ their country. Um, and
Right.
then and to fund that, we are are taxed, right? It's taxpayer dollars going to the defense contractors to go invade the countries to establish business interests.
It's not the Department of Defense, it's the Department of Offense. If
Yeah,
if it was the Department of Defense, then we would never have needed a Department of Homeland Security after 9/11 because we would have had the Department of Defense to defend us,
you're so
right?
right. I love that.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah. And
100%.
so it's just another layer of taxpayer money wasted, bloated, you know, just giant egos knocking heads against
In
each other. Yeah.
it's used in the pursuit of profit, because shareholders must make more money. So again, Paul, let's not blame the players, okay? I'm not hating on the players. I'm hating on the game.
Hmm.
They built this.
Hmm.
And if they don't go and exploit other countries and go get their labor forces or go get their natural resources, they will go out of business.
Your point is an excellent point, and you know what? It applies to the next category here, the medical industrial complex. It's the same exact thing in my mind about the exploitation and the shell game. So much of this is a zero-sum game. It's okay, it's our profit at your expense. Now, I'll ask you a question. Have you ever heard of the movie? I'm sure you've heard of it. Have you ever seen the movie It's a Wonderful Life?
Yes.
Okay. So George Bailey represented Bedford Falls. He was the banker. It was a wonderful community. Everybody got along great. You had, the person who put 20% down for a home, and there were rules and guardrails for how the system operated in that small town. And it worked very well because everyone had that sense of community, right? Along comes Mr. Potter, who has different ideas, you know, and he wants to blow the whole thing up and confiscate as much as he can for himself, right? And guardrails don't matter to him. Well, the only thing that matters to him was greed. And the the system wasn't quite able to until push came to shove. And the end of the movie, we see that Bedford Falls gets restored back to that healthy, thriving, community-based system. Well, Bobby Kennedy is here to restore us to Bedford Falls. We are now in Pottersville, and the wealth in the hands of the few, like Mr. Potter, is grotesque. It's something that I've used this term, Shauna. It would make Caligula blush. Okay, that's how insane it is today. Bobby Kennedy sees this, and in his words, we talk about the system, capitalism. Capitalism needs to be harnessed to a social purpose. And what that means is having
Yes.
guardrails, not playing this shell game, making yourself rich because you're making your neighbor rich, because you're enriching the community. That's the idea. Not polluting the community so that you can make more money, not enriching yourself at the expense of your neighbor, but doing something for the good of all. That's Bedford Falls. That's what Bobby Kennedy wants to return us to. We can talk about this in terms of the medical industrial complex because we've seen examples of this about, you know, how the Sackler family with OxyContin, for example, or the Insys company with fentanyl, many other examples. And those are the prominent ones. But there are many other examples of pharmaceutical companies where, all right, they may not get the same kind of bad publicity as the Sacklers did with Purdue Pharma, but they're equally sinister in the sense that they're not necessarily uh, doing what is required to put the public good first or the patient first. They're putting the profit first. And I know you know that. So talk about that a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, they have to continue making money. And profits for the shareholders. And so they're going to, so you have a couple ways you can do that. You can cut costs, so you can make
Mhm.
things cheaper. You can make production cheaper. You can make labor cheaper. You can make the ingredients cheaper. You can make the containers cheaper. You can make shipping cheaper. You can do all kinds of things. I don't have an MBA, I'm just running off of my own knowledge here, but so you can do that. You can increase profit by expanding your market, so going after new people. So they definitely do that. We see the advertisements everywhere with with the drug companies. They're trying to reach new people so that more people take their prescriptions. And we've also seen those documentaries where we see the drug reps
Mhm.
stalking the
Sure.
doctors, getting them to sell their stuff. So
Oh, yeah. Oh, and we're only one of two countries in the world. The other one is New Zealand, and it's nothing like it is here. We're one of two countries that actually allows advertising on television for pharmaceutical products. And 70% of the, I used to think it was 50, but I've learned it's more than that, of the advertising on these evening talk shows is by pharmaceutical companies. How likely do you think it is that those evening talk shows, MSNBC, Fox, CNN, you name it, how likely do you think it is that they're going to divulge any of this activity behind the scenes at these drug companies? I don't think it's happening.
so we've seen already companies pull out their advertising or pull their funding from certain companies because of bad things happening. I can't
Hmm.
think, like, I'm not going to try to think of an example right now, but we've seen that happen several times where they've
Hmm.
pulled their funding, like for Kanye, right? So they pull their funding because something embarrassing happens and they're like, no, that's too risky. We can't do it. He's gotten other brand deals later. I'm not going after Kanye. I'm just saying
Yeah,
it
yeah.
happens.
And I'm okay with that. Personally, if a company says this is just me, and we can agree or disagree, it doesn't matter. If somebody says something that is out of bounds, out of line, and I'm advertising on their platform, whatever it is, uh, if I'm a company, whether I'm, a large multinational or just a small local company, I reserve the right to advertise and place my word where I want to. That's my decision. So if
Right.
Kanye, so I could see somebody pulling an ad from Kanye, or even from Elon if he says something that's, off base. And, he went on TV and talked about how uh, you know, uh, they can go F themselves for pulling their, nobody. He thought he was being blackmailed. And my response was, no, Elon, you weren't being blackmailed. They were making a decision based on your behavior. That's what was
There's a
happening.
difference of opinion, right? There's a
Yes.
difference of opinion and they will pull the funding. Well, they haven't pulled the funding, Paul.
Mm,
So that means that there is an agreement somewhere. And I don't
right.
know if that agreement is that they're all owned by the same people or if there's just handshakes. But at the end of the day, they're on this if they're on the channel, if they're on the network, that means that the network agrees with the companies that are advertising and vice
Mm,
versa.
true. That's true. Yeah, you're right.
So
Um,
the other thing that people can do to increase profits, you can increase your market or you can produce new drugs.
mhm.
So there is an incentive. I'm sorry, it's not only an incentive, it's a requirement to stay in business to increase profit. And therefore, the companies now at this point have been pushed to the point where they're making really horrible decisions for humans because they have to, because there's no other ways for them to make profit off of us. We
Hmm.
have been sucked dry. They tried to put more money into the economy so that we would have more buying power so that the businesses could keep going. And now we have another mess too. So I think we really need to re-examine how our corporations and businesses are structured and how the stock market is structured. Why are we giving awards to people who increase profit? We need to be giving awards to people who solve our problems.
Hmm. Incentive structure, big
That's
problem.
right.
Hmm.
That's right.
And I'll tell you what, the key measure of our economy of goods and services, we call it GDP, right? Gross domestic product. And I'm here to tell everyone, because this doesn't get talked about, but I'll just fill everyone in here. GDP is not only is a joke, it's a complete house of cards, and I'll tell you why. Nearly 20% of our GDP, for example, is in healthcare, and most of that money, well over $4 trillion, right? Most of that money is chasing these chronic diseases that didn't exist a few decades ago, but they, excuse me, they've somehow found their way into the system, and now these corporations are profiting off of a model of sickness, right? That's not that's not economic activity. That is profiteering off of the health and wellness of the population.
I
So
want to
there's
repeat that. I want to repeat that. So somebody
please.
at some point made a decision or made an observation that it's more profitable for hospitals if people are sicker.
Mhm, mhm.
Okay.
Right. And we're not talking about, I we all have our doctors, we love our doctors. There are actually a lot of heroes at the local level.
Perhaps,
Where
yes.
I spoke yesterday to a doctor who was one of the founders of the Great Barrington Pledge, and we're going to have her on our podcast. I've spoken where I'm having another person who spoke at the of the nomination of Nicole Shanahan in Oakland a few weeks back. Kelly Ryerson, she's going to be on our podcast. These people are heroes. They speak out. Dr. Mary Bowden from Houston, who I know only from a distance, but she spoke out about treating her patients first, and she was tarnished. She had her license revoked because she didn't fall in line with the narrative. That narrative of profit, right? She decided to put her patients first and treat her patients. And there are doctors like that all over the place, those heroes. The FLCCC, which is the Frontline COVID Critical Care Alliance, Doctors Marek and Corey and many others. There's Dr. Peter McCullough, Dr. Bhattacharya, many others, and Dr. Mark Hyman. I don't know how many of them are 100% right all the time. I don't think that's the issue. I think the issue is that they these people are motivated. They're in business, but they're motivated by putting the patient first. And that happens all across America. The problem is at the institutional level, which includes these agencies, right? And the big pharma companies. And you're right. They're of a different breed. They're a different breed of person. They're not interested in the public well-being as they are in their own sort of image and legacy and bank account.
I
Uh,
don't
so
I don't hate on the players. They were raised and reaffirmed over and over and over again, reinforced
mhm,
that this is the way that you should live, and this is what is good, and this is what will make you happy.
mhm,
Okay? And all of the laws back it up. And everything around you, including our media, is showing you that this is the way that you should be. So I'm not going to hate the players, right? But and it's no surprise that you're one of this doctor that you were talking about was attacked because structures are there to reinforce itself. It's not there to get any better. It's there to stay there the same and just continue on marching, right? Like you might be able to reinforce it, make it stronger. But you're not going to allow any difference of opinion. Because if there's any difference of opinion, then the system is at jeopardy. Then people are questioning what the system's doing. And if you question what the system's doing, then they can't make money off of us. And that's a big problem for them. Right? So it's no shock that she got this kind of blowback because any independent actors that are outside of the system
Mhm.
are a threat to the system.
Exactly. No, exactly. I mean, I've been a Wall Street whistleblower of sorts for many years, and you don't have to look too far to find shenanigans on Wall Street and in the monetary system in general, right? And getting back to the Pottersville example, how if there's $2, if there's $2 in the world, and you and I each have $1, Shauna, that means we each own half the wealth. Well, what if I have the ability to print money? I print eight more dollars, right? Now there's $10 in the world. You still have one, so your wealth has gone from 50% down to 10%. Now I have 90% of the wealth, right? That's been the system. It's a simplified example, but that's been the
Wait, so
system.
we need to explain how that happens. So they print more money and everybody gets it, right? But who are they giving the money to? They're
Mhm,
giving money to the businesses. They're
mhm,
spending it on the businesses. Therefore, the businesses are making the money. So if there's
mhm.
more money in circulation, businesses will
And
get it.
government programs and government
Yeah.
agencies,
It goes to
right? Yes,
businesses if it goes into circulation. So they printed more money for themselves.
right,
And
right.
now we can't afford food anymore.
So my theory on this goes back to when we went off the gold standard in
Yes.
1971.
Huge
That's
problem.
when that's when the system said we can now begin to print money, and we're the world's reserve currency. So we can finance as much as we want. We can issue as much credit as we want. The rest of the world is going to finance us. If you look, Shauna, at the stock market, the global stock market over the last 16 years, I want to go back to 2008 when the financial crisis hit then, and the Fed printed a lot of money on the heels of the great financial crisis of '08. And it's as if they said, okay, now we know what can happen without us coming to the rescue. So from now on, we're not going to let this happen again. So for all of us like myself who have been waiting for the other shoe to drop, there is no other shoe to have dropped because they've just kept printing money. They've, ad infinitum. So the more money they print, the more distorted our society becomes, the sicker we become as a nation, right? And and so the all of this money printing has turned us more and more into Pottersville, right? And we have now this $34 trillion of debt, almost 35. Who's going to pay that? Who's going to pay that? We we were the world's only superpower after World War II. Well, with Russia, but we won the Cold War. And so now we have um, this money printing spigot. I was starting to say before, going back to 2008, virtually all of the stock market gains in the world since 2008 have been strictly in the United States. The rest of the world has been flat for 16 years. The United States stock market has just about tripled over the last 16 years. Now, somebody might say, well, we must be really doing something right. And my response is no, we're just making the rest of the world pay because
We're
we're
cheating.
taking we're cheating, right? It's a zero sum game. So,
Yeah.
we're taking from others. And this is, I think, one of the main reasons why we have all of this political upheaval because other countries are suffering. When you do this, the blowback is felt on Main Street all across the world, and you get these geopolitical upheavals, and countries are starting to push back. and they're saying, hey, we're not going to let the United States do this anymore. And I know, to me, the country that comes to mind with that is China, especially. You know, um,
Yeah. I want to repeat a couple things that you said because I want to make sure that the audience really understands it very clearly. So what you started on is that you said that our world is traded in dollars. And I really need people to understand what that means. So especially because oil is traded in dollars. Now that's changing right now. We have some action with BRICS, and people and countries are starting to trade in other currencies, their oil.
that's right. That's
And
right.
that is why the United States is freaking out right now, scrambling, trying to get all of their little oil reserves back traded in dollars. Because if it's traded in dollars, then the United States basically always gets a cut because we decide how much the dollar is worth. And so we can set prices accordingly so that we are always making money off of somebody else. So what is it when somebody makes like somebody is spending money, so they're losing it and you're gaining it. There's an exchange that happens. So
It's a shell game.
if you're setting the price and you can print unlimited dollars of that, then you can control everything. You can control the entire world's economy.
Right.
And the United States, with the control of the oil traded in dollars,
Right.
plus the military, we control the entire planet. And anything trying to convince anyone that we are under threat of all those things, yeah, now we are. We're under threat now. I would agree with that. We are in jeopardy right now. But like 3 years ago, we still were running the planet and they were inventing new stuff for us to be concerned about and then for us to fight about internally because coincidentally, every single time the parties were on opposite sides of the issues. I'm sick of it, Paul.
I just want to come back to the debt issue, because what's happened is when the Fed prints all this money, and we get all what we're essentially doing is we're taking resources from the future. We're taking our children and grandchildren's generation, their labor, their health, their
We're taking a
toil
loan. We're taking out a loan on our future.
on our
Yeah.
future, plopping it into the present. Now, if we had stayed in that sound money system with gold as a backing, and we had stayed in Bedford Falls, we would have had a lot less money, but it would have grown organically, not artificially like it has. The organic growth is Bedford Falls. The artificial growth is Pottersville. So we
Yeah.
take all of these trillions of dollars, we plop it into the present. That money should have taken 50 to 100 years to be earned and grown organically over that time. Instead, we took it all in sort of this instant gratification way, and we plopped it into the present, and we said, okay, whoever works hardest is the greediest, and we'll whatever the qualifications are,
You're the
go
winner.
grab go
You're
grab
the
it.
winner.
It's a land grab, right? So
Yep.
you had, you know, and we know who those people are. They've come in, and this is where the social media impact really scares me, because I am a very strong proponent of free speech, and I totally love what Bobby says about the importance of free speech. And if you lose the First Amendment, you lose all the others, and I get that. I totally agree with it. The qualification I want to add there is that when you've created all this social media, and suddenly you create this environment where people have this ability to go on to this right here, and just spend all day, and you know we're we're in this instant gratification indulgent society, perpetrated by all this borrowed money. I won't even call it capital, because it's not. It's credit, right? And
It's a
lo
pyramid
and be
scheme.
exactly. And lo and behold, what do we have? We have, you know, huge jumps in suicidal ideations, depression, people cutting themselves,
I would love to
bulimia.
this is a great point. So in Texas, they recently passed legislation because of the critical race theory that was roaring through the Texas schools,
Mhm.
threatening everyone.
Right.
They passed legislation, and you know what the bill said? Curriculum will follow business industries' recommendations or needs. It says they're
Who's that? Whose recommendations?
businesses.
Which
So
ones?
it's so they're not it doesn't matter. Just the industry. They
Hmm.
make it
Hmm.
vague. They don't name them.
Right.
But
Okay.
what it doesn't mention is curriculum will develop well-rounded, strongly emotionally developed stand-up human beings. That's not anywhere in there at all.
Right. Right.
And so if they're willing to prop it up from the very start of life. They're willing to prop up this system and start you off of a mentality of this is how it is. And they will start you on curriculum that business wants you to start on. And
Sure.
that to me is a dystopian future.
It is, and it goes to, I mean, we could, I don't want to go too deeply into this, but we could talk about theoretically, like, the early childhood vaccination schedules and how that whole thing comes into play. We could
There's
talk about
74 vaccines?
74 doses of 17, I think, different.
Insane.
So, yeah,
That
yeah,
seem that is insane.
that is insane. That is insane. And none of them have ever had the long-term double-blind safety studies that Bobby has been calling for, right? See, he'll get to the bottom of this. It's a travesty. And again, if you're pro-vac, I got vaccinated. I was one of the early adopters of getting a vaccine. I want everyone to understand this is not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about where the incentives lie, right? Is it possible? Just consider the possibility, because that's all I'm doing right now, that these vaccines, because they were granted exoneration from any liability. At the time, there was only three vaccines back in the 80s,
Emergency
right? Yeah,
emergency authorization to skip certain trials and certain criteria because of the urgency of the COVID
that's
pandemic.
right.
Yeah.
And the audience needs to know, just for example, if there is an existing drug that can be repurposed, then they're not allowed by law to develop a vaccine. So they try to avoid, and this was the whole sort of debate with certain treatments available during the COVID era. And I don't want to talk about COVID too much, because that we need a whole segment devoted to that. It's more complex, but
I'm not the
suffice it to
expert on that, but we can
okay,
talk about the incentives.
the incentives, right? And that's the key. So, so lo and behold, you get these drug companies are exonerated from any liability. Now you get this gold rush of vaccine development. Like you said, we're up to 74 doses. We used to have only 3 or 4. What the hell? What is that, right? And and none of these have been properly tested. Meanwhile, we've got this incredible surge in chronic diseases in this country. Now, I don't give a damn whether you're a Democrat or a Republican. We have 60% of people in this country with a chronic disease. It used to be 6%. This isn't, like you said, the word is insane, right? And we're all being, media is being used to kind of mind meld us into this pit of complicity.
Mhm.
And I'm like, hold on, time out a second. I think I still have a brain left. I intend to use it, and I'm going to start asking questions. There's a lot of correlation here between this increase in diabetes and ADHD and ADD and autism and obesity. You can go right down the line. There's all kinds of Lyme disease. There's all kinds of and of course cancer, explosion. And if you just look around, Shauna, I don't know what it's like in your state, but here in New Jersey, I'm seeing businesses close down all over the place, and what's getting erected in their place, businesses that are going up, are these emergency care centers, children's hospitals, diagnostic centers, radiology, you know, all of these sort of healthcare, almost like we're being turned into lab rats.
So Kennedy does not say for certain that the vaccines cause anything. He's
No.
won a couple lawsuits saying that the jury finds companies responsible for certain things. But he doesn't say that A equals B. But he does say that this is probably the number one priority that this country should be thinking and talking about and researching and figuring out. We have to figure this out.
And NIH, day one, we're going to get to the bottom of this.
Yeah.
No nonsense. And you're right. And none of us should say, point the finger and say this is the cause. We can talk about correlation. Correlation is not causation. And the reality is, Shauna, you said you're not an expert. I'm not an expert. Neither are the doctors. How much do we really know about the human body and the intricacies of playing around with DNA and RNA and developing these gene altering treatments? The reality is we know so little. We know infinitely more than we used to. But
Hmm.
I'm going to say we know maybe 2 or 3% of all there is to know about the human body and its place in the world, its connection with the universe. And I mean, we may think we know a lot, but we have to really bring this industry, just like the military industrial complex, we need to bring it down a few notches and introduce the concept of humility in there. You know, all of these MICs need humility, right?
Yeah. They just started testing women and writing new medical books saying that, oh, there's differences between bodies with men and women and they're important and
Mhm,
significant.
mhm.
Um when there's so we're talking about power, right?
Yep.
It's really powerful for the population of the world and or the United States to believe that doctors are saying the right thing every single time because they're 100% correct. As a person that goes to the doctor, I am literally putting my life in their hands saying, "I trust you to know exactly what to do and to be right about it. And if you don't, I can sue you," right? But that's what's happening. And if we just now started studying women and we know, like you said, perhaps 2 or 3% of what the human body is, and we take what they say is absolutely true, and then we make decisions based on those assumptions as if they are true, as if we know for certain that they're true, and it's not just the current level of understanding that we have now. That's what science is, a snapshot in
Exactly.
our current understanding, and
Which
it's
should
going
always,
to change tomorrow,
that's right, it should
every
always be
time.
questioned. Because guess what, Shauna? The world is not flat.
No,
even
it's
though
not.
even though science once convinced, and
I don't want to exclude any QAnon people from this conversation, but no, the world is not flat. I'm sorry. It's not a firmament. Okay.
and Galileo did not
Tired of
deserve to be burned at the stake either, right? Um, but but it's funny because I can see how when you become the bigger the world, the bigger the superpower, the bigger the collapse. It's like you can almost feel it coming, and it doesn't have to happen if we the people can sort of arrest this trend and take power back for ourselves. And the way to take back power
all of us
is
feel it
not to,
coming.
yeah, we do, and people are losing sleep over it, and we're all being prescribed, and it's a there's a darkness hanging over, but but again, I'm here to tell you guys, Bobby Kennedy is the light. He's the knight in shining armor that, and I'm not trying to put him up on a pedestal. He's a flawed person, but he is governed by principles. You know,
He's
and we
honest.
devoted a whole segment to this too. Governed by principles of honor and integrity in his governing style, in his daily life. You know, the most important decision he makes every day is to make his bed. You know, think about that for a second from a presidential candidate, right? And because that's who
Discipline.
he is. You
It's
know,
important to do
it
the
is
small things,
to
to
do the
hold
small
yourself
things
accountable. Yeah.
and the next right thing, and that's what he's always done. And so I want to bring back this chart because the reality is he can address every one of these with his and he talks about all of these, right, Shauna? How he's
Yeah.
going to deal with the military, how he's going to deal with the medical. He has a very strict set of plans to deal with this travesty and the chronic disease epidemic, and it's one of the main reasons why he asked Nicole to join his ticket, right? The monetary, he's always talking about how Trump and Biden, borrowed more money under their administrations than every administration combined up until 2016, right?
They're on the same
And
team.
they're all in the same team, and Bobby says that as long as we're fighting each other, red versus blue, rock'em sock'em robots, right? They can go back inside their castle and pop champagne corks because we're not coming over the wall. And Bobby is saying, guess what, guys? We are coming over that wall, and we the people are coming over that wall, and he's going to take our country back for us, uh, and he's going to die with his boots on if he has to. Those are his words, right?
Yeah.
Um,
I think the right and left create a fight, a never ending fight. But I think we do that in many different situations. There's many different fields and industries where we can apply that left versus right fight. And that means that we're never actually solving that problem. It's in business's best interest for that fight to happen because it's distracting, and never ending means that we get exhausted by it. And if we're exhausted, then we're compliant and peaceful. All of these things kind of work together. Um, so yeah, the candidate wants to solve problems. He wants to
exactly.
do the work and collect the experts, the field industry experts. He doesn't want to put politicians in there. He doesn't necessarily, and he doesn't want to also put the corrupt CEOs that have been making these horrible decisions for our country and for our people. And he knows who those people are because he's been suing them over and over and over again in court and winning.
He's got
And
a PhD in how to unravel
yeah,
corporate capture. Those are his words again.
and I love
And
it.
and he understands the most important concept that I think can come from my lips today, and that is that true power is found in service to others, not acquiring power for power's sake. Just like money in and of itself is not evil. It's the love of money that's the root of evil. It's the love of power that's the root of evil. But power used properly, like Bobby Kennedy would do, in service to others, is the kind of power that we can rejoice in, right? And that's who he is. And I don't think there's ever been, I mean, there are probably presidents in history who have had bits and pieces of those qualities in them, but none like Bobby. I mean, I think he's taken the mantle of his father and his uncle and really kind of elevated it to a new level. And I think that the way the nation is today, conditions demand that he do that almost because things have gotten a lot worse, you know.
Yeah.
And all of these industrial complexes, the media industrial complex, he has a plan for dealing with that. The food and agriculture, he's been talking about this, and if you look on the Kennedy 24 website, you'll see all of the things he's done.
He's
Like
got
we
a really
referred to
good
earlier,
roundtable that they discussed really
they
amazing
that was last year,
things,
right? The
and
one
it's very impressive.
with Elizabeth, and they were, they had all of the. I was on that too, and yes. So he starts by listening. He goes down to the border,
Yeah.
spends 3 days there, learning, listening, gathering the information. He goes back a second time, just to demonstrate his commitment and to learn more. Um, and there's nothing in Bobby's platform that is, election year boondoggling or, you know, platitudes. There's none of that from him. He is the same man as he was when Time magazine called him hero of the planet. When New York magazine wrote in the 1990s, the Kennedy who matters, he is still that Kennedy. He is still that man today. And yet, New York magazine last year, in a column by Rebecca Traister, uh, panned him.
I
This
think
goes,
he's I think he's even better, Paul, because
mm,
he's evolved. And I know that he's evolved because he didn't run for president before. He's running
right,
now,
right,
and he's willing to literally put his life on the line for it. He says, it's either this or death. And I
right.
totally get that. Yeah. So something that I wanted to actually open with, but I think it's okay to say it at the end.
Mhm.
The good thing and the terrible thing about power is that it's imaginary and we can't measure it, and it doesn't really exist on this plane. We can't see it and we can't touch it. It just exists in our minds. So the good thing about that is we can change our minds, and all of a sudden the power that was once held over us is now gone. It's could happen in an instant. The bad thing is that because it's in our minds, and here's a great example. I'm a volleyball coach. I coach little kids how to play volleyball better. Sometimes they can't convince their bodies with their brains to do something different than they were trying to do before. And it's literally a mental decision to make the limb do a different thing, but they can't do it. They struggle with it, right? And so there's the problem, right? Is when you can't you can struggle to change your mind. You can look around and be reinforced everywhere that you know the answer, you have the answer, and that you're doing the right thing. Um, and it can be really difficult to change your mind on that. And because of that, you are being controlled in ways that you can't even imagine. And you are being crushed. You're being crushed
Mhm. Yes. And it's
with
all an
that
illusion.
how it's the weight of the power, and it's the weight of all of those structures, right? All of those structures rule our lives. We in our little cars and our little lives, we run around those structures. We our river is broken by those structures. We run in the lines that they have set for us, right? That is extreme levels of power, and it crushes us. And the people that are willing to say goodbye to all of those and leave that, we're really dangerous, Paul, because we're saying we'd rather die than continue to live that way.
We, um, loving our neighbors, loving ourselves, uh, being of
That's
service to
powerful.
others, living
Building a community is powerful
living
because
in
the
love and tolerance
individual,
of others. We're no longer, we are, as I said at the outset, we are the wide awake, we are the non-programmable, we are the non-exploitable, right? And we care about what world our children and grandchildren are going to grow up in. We don't want them to be puppets in that dystopian future that we talked about earlier. And
yeah,
it's
and
it,
we take responsibility
yeah, I mean,
for what we
my
do.
generation, the baby boomers, have to take responsibility because we were the
100%.
ones who caused this freaking mess.
I know
You
it's
know,
painful
yeah,
because you're guilty you're ashamed, you're a little
Yes.
embarrassed. I know
Yes.
that it's painful to face those things, but once you do,
That's
then
right.
you can start to heal. Then your family will
Exactly.
start talking to you again.
So baby boomers, my fellow baby boomers out there, okay? Uh, you didn't personally screw anything up. You
No.
just participate in a system that, as part of its mastery over the population, created this sense of complicity and this benign neglect among the masses. So we never really had to look. We were all looking the other way and not paying attention to the
Running in the
ultimate price.
background. It's just happening back here, and
Yeah,
you're just
yeah,
looking
yeah.
forward and thinking about making money and spending it on your credit cards.
Right, right. And so here we are. We're faced with a decision, and I have said, Shauna, that this is, for a while there, I was trying to convince people that this is a three-way race. And I realized about 3 months ago, I realized that that was a mistake. It's not a three-way race. It is a two-way race. On one hand, you have the duopoly, Trump and Biden, or
Yeah.
you know, and that rock'em sock'em robots world. Like we said before, it doesn't matter. They both ran up the debt. They're both operating in that same system of extractionism, of feudalism, of playing trading favors for their own perception of power and political gain. Uh, that's the two-party system, right?
Everybody complains about how nothing gets done, nothing improves, and nobody solves any problems in Congress. Everybody
And the
complains
problems
about that all the time.
and
They
the
do
problems
it
are getting
on purpose.
worse. The
They do
problems are
it on
getting
purpose.
worse. Right.
They
The
don't solve them because that's not in business's best interest. If it
right.
was in business's best interest, the problems would be solved. We would have the best minds flown in on a helicopter to solve that problem if a business could make more money for that,
hmm hmm
in my
Right.
opinion.
Right. Now, um, so so the two-way race is the duopoly versus this group of us who are ready to declare our independence. And
We're moving
we
on.
know what's that?
We're moving on.
Right. And Bobby is that figure who will lead us to a better future. We know this to be true, and we also know that Bobby Kennedy is far more popular than this duopoly wants us to believe, and how
100%.
they're using the media, how they conduct polls, for example, Trump versus Biden. Well, you know what? If you see a poll of Trump versus Biden, throw it out the window. It's meaningless. The whole Trump versus Biden thing is a specific, calculated attempt by the media and the polling companies who are owned by the media, right, to deceive us into thinking that it's a two-way race between those two. But the two-way race is between the duopoly and Bobby Kennedy, going to who's going to really bring about the change we need, who's going to reverse that chronic disease epidemic, who's going to, redirect that military spending abroad that's just, infusing the coffers of these billionaire class, and
It's
he's going
controlling and enslaving the entire planet, and it has to
to
stop.
you can absolutely make that statement too, and redirect some of that spending back here in our homeland where we need to rebuild our infrastructure, right? Who will humanely handle the border issue and have the border done properly without, you know, calling countries shithole countries or looking down upon people, or but doing it humanely, but having the rules in place that say, hey, if you want to come in here, you need to play by the rules, and having that system in place. He will do that right away. Right away. It will happen. He will end the chronic disease epidemic, right? He will fix this media industrial complex and restore free speech and change the incentives. He will get rid of the glyphosate in the food supply, which is killing us. It literally is killing us. Callie Means talked about it as genocide, right? And I agree with that statement. It's a stealth genocide. Again, for profit.
It's a systematic mass poisoning.
Mhm, mhm. for profit, right?
For profit. Yeah.
And so Bobby is the only one who can and will end all of that. He's the only one. None of the other ones have the ability, the track record, or the desire to do that, right? Um, so there's so much at stake here, Shauna. There's so much at stake. Um, and this is a 1776 moment. It truly is. I hope people grasp the gravity of that statement. And when they, what we need people to understand is, this is the winning side. The winning side is the side of the people and the power returning to the people. So when you go into that voting booth on November 5th, you can comfortably pull that lever for hope and change that Bobby represents, because that's what we need in this country. We're not going to survive any other option. We just will not survive. This is existential. This whole this country in particular, but the world at large, we are faced with absolute existential threats. I'm not trying to sound alarm bells for no reason. This is what's happening.
I had AI talk to me about what it thought about our topics today. And one thing that I brought up was, I think John Locke and Rousseau talked about freedom and control and power. And Locke is a big fan of creating peace through rules. And Rousseau says that you're born free. And I like that better. You're born free, and all the rules are all of things that are artificial that humans made up and that control you. Animals are free. They don't have any human rules. They just live unless they're domesticated. They just live their lives. They're not controlled at all. There's no laws, right? So every single law that is incepted is a form of control. Now, some of them are good laws, right? We agree to some of them. There's some of them that are necessary, but most of them aren't. And so we need to stop making rules that are not in the best interest of humans, at the very least. Stop making rules at all, or stop making rules that kill us.
We definitely need to find our way to that better balance of, where, and this to me goes back to the perfect case in point are the agencies. So if somebody says to me, shut down the EPA, my response is, and this goes back to the point you were making about people who can't defend themselves, right? Well, if you shut down the EPA, what's going to happen when an oil company goes into a town and does that horizontal fracking, and your whole community gets, earthquaked out of existence? What is your recourse? So the EPA is supposed to be there to protect from stuff like that happening, right? And I want that. I want those government agencies to be strong and pillars of the community, not these captured, knuckleheads that are just taking advantage of everything everywhere they can. So we do need to find that balance. That's my take on it. Same thing with, again, same thing with the media and what discourse is helping advance the cause of society versus what is causing addictive behaviors and unhealthy choices among our youth. And there's a lot of a lot of issues there, that need to be looked at. And I think social media. I mean, if Facebook is knowingly profiting off of an algorithm that they know is going to cause addiction and unhealthy next actions on the part of a whole group of young people, there's an element of evil to that I want to see an agency be on top of as well. So
yeah, and then on the contrast, TikTok has now educated Gen Z kind of single-handedly. They have organized, they have educated themselves. And the only way that they were able to do that was because of TikTok. And so it's important to note that Russell Brand likes to talk about this. It's okay for two things to be true at one time. And things are more nuanced than people talk about. We have to talk about the nuances and the multi-sides of problems, because if we don't, then they just become these unsolvable things that we left and right fight about. We've got to get all of it. We got to get our arms around it, right?
It all belongs in the discussion, and
Yeah.
we need, and this is why, we find the answers in common ground. There's no, certitude and absolutism, they're the enemy.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's
And
exactly right.
and
Obedience, bad. Duty, good.
there you go. I like that. We can end it there. That's awesome. I'm going
Okay.
to make that the title of our discussion today.
That's wonderful. That
Okay.
sounds good.
All right.
Thank you, Paul.
God bless, Shauna. Thank you.
God bless you, Paul, and thank you so much for having me. And
Thank you. Great stuff.
best wishes for the Kennedy campaign and Kennedy for 2024. That's who you should vote for. Goodbye.